In this tutorial, we will move beyond a single non-player character and have a list of enemies that we will look through to give better action. To do this, we are going to first of all set up a list of random non-player characters, or NPCs, and we will then draw them to the screen. We have previously used A and B for our enemy coordinates, and we're going to change these to using a list of coordinates instead. So we will start off by going to Replit. We're going to go to Teams, and you should be reloading a chapter that you have already worked on, which is Phase 8, Multiple Enemies and Bitmaps. So the state of play should be that if you run your code, then we should have a robber in this case, since I changed my graphic, but a zombie perhaps. And then if we click in this window and use the arrow keys, we can steer our cop and get points when we overlap with the position of the enemy. So I'll just change this back from robber to zombie. And what we want to do, instead of setting up here A and B as our random points, we're going to make a number of different enemies. So I'm going to comment out this line at line 14, and I'm going to say instead NPC list equals, and just some empty square brackets. So the list starts out with nothing in it. And notice I've used camel case here, capital L on list. So it is important that you spell things the same way each time you use them. And then I'm going to say for NPC in range, and I'm going to start out and have a range of 5 enemy characters. We could change this. We could even set a constant so that we could easily change it at the start of each run of the game. So for NPCs in range 5, and notice I've now been tabbed in because I've got a block made from 4 here, and I'm going to say that NPC list, so the empty list, I'm going to dot append. Now append means to add to the end of, so I'm going to add something onto the end of the list. And what I'm going to add on is a pair of coordinates. So my pair are going to go inside square brackets, and there's going to be a comma between them. The first item is going to be a random number up to maximum of the width of the screen. So this is like X and Y coordinates. So as we had before for A and B, random dot randint, and that is going to be between 0 and max width. So that's my X coordinate, and my Y coordinate is going to be random dot randint, and that's going to be between 0 and max height. I'll just close this up a little bit so that we can see that a bit more easily. So there we have a little loop that makes 5 random copies of X and Y coordinates. And what I now need to do is to draw zombies at each of these positions. So down in my screen section, instead of screen.blitzzombie, I'm going to say for monster in NPC list. So I'm using NPC list. I can call my variable that I'm accessing it with anything I like. I've called it monster here because each of them is a monster. And I'm then going to say, well, previously I was saying screen.blit zombie a comma b. And actually I can just reuse that. So I'm going to move it up and tab it in. It needs to be tabbed in below the for loop. But instead of A comma B, I'm going to say monster 0. That's the first bit of information. And instead of B, I'm going to say monster 1. And that's the second bit of information. Now, if I try to run this program at the moment, we've got a problem in that the code that used to update our single character is now not able to find an A and a B. And you can see here that at line 75, A is changing, B is changing, and then we make a whole bunch of comparisons with A and B in order to see whether it's gone off the edge of the screen. And then finally, we check whether we have overlapped with A and B to check whether we have collided. So there's a lot of A and B code here. In each case, we need to replace A with monster 0 and B with monster 1. So I'm just going to quickly go through all of this code. I'm going to put a monster square bracket 0 there. And it'll just be quite helpful if I highlight and copy that. So if I copy, and then each time I see an A variable, I'm going to replace it with monster 0. And I need to do this for every A variable mention that is in here, and make sure that I don't mess up my indentation levels. So that seems to have dealt with all of the A's, and then B is going to be replaced with monster brackets 1. Now if you're working on an offline editor, you've probably got things like find and replace that could be used to make this much easier. But since I am working in the online editor, I don't think I have that available to me. Okay, now that doesn't seem to have solved much at all because we haven't actually declared a loop for monster here. So what I need to do is for each monster, I need to loop through them. So I'm going to come to here and say for monster in NPC list, and then all of these have to be indented inside the list. So I can highlight them all, and I'm just going to double tab them in to make it more obvious. And then also, once I've done each monster, I need to check for collision on the individual monster. So I'm also going to move the score checker inside and replace my A and B with monster 1 and A with monster 0. And I spelled it wrong there, so monter is not the same as monster. That should be good to go now. And if I run this, you can see I have 5 individual zombies all wandering around. And if I click into, click stop there. If I click into this window and move, then each time I bounce into one, I will start to get a score. So, one last tweak that we can make to our game. At the moment, we catch the zombies, but not much happens. So what I'm going to do is to come here to where each zombie is being examined for overlap. And I'm going to say if. Now we're going to use check collide again here. Check collide gives us a score of 0 if we are doing nothing, and a score of something more than that if we've banged into it. So I'm going to say if check collide is greater than 0, That means I must have hit something. So at that point, I can then say monster 0, comma, monster 1 equals, and I can give them some respawning coordinates. So monster 0, the x coordinate, might be over at the far end of the screen. So that would be max width minus size. And the y coordinate might be maybe just half of max height. So now, if I bounce into, I need to start in here, if I bounce into something, you can see that eventually they're all clustering where they've respawned over in that corner. And I can probably have fun bouncing into them and having them respawning endlessly in that single spot. I could of course have them respawn somewhere random, but these are all details that would change the way the game plays. So we have now a finished template, and it's now over to you to decide what kind of tweaks and adjustments will you make to turn this into a playable game.